Hey guys, it's Lindsay here of Sew to Grow. Have you ever wanted to learn how to sew leather on your domestic sewing machine? Well, today is the day that you're going to learn. I'm going to share with you my top 5 tips to help you sew leather on your domestic sewing machine. So let's gather up our tools and get started. Tip number 1 is making sure that you're picking the right leather to sew on your domestic sewing machine at home. So depending on the weight to size ratio, different hides represent a different thickness level. So if we're talking about a cowhide, that's going to be much thicker than, say, a sheepskin leather. So what I have here, this is an Italian sheepskin leather, and as you can see as I'm holding it, it has a beautiful soft drape and feel, making it perfect for bags or clothing or anything like that. Also, the reason I get this leather, the reason I sew with it, is because I know that it's going to work on everyone's domestic sewing machine, so that even if you're making a bag and you're sewing through multiple layers, it's easy enough for your machine at home to sew through. Tip number 2 is all about how to cut with leather. So the first thing I want you guys to notice is that leather is obviously not a square shape, so you can't just go to your local fabric store and order a couple meters off the bolt. It is obviously the shape of the hide that it comes off of. So the other thing that I want you to notice is that there are certain parts of the leather that have different properties. So you have the middle, which is considered the spine, and that's the best place to place your handles or anything that you want to be really strong and sturdy, because that's the strongest part of the hide. Then you have the outer bit. This is the part that wraps around the stomach, and it's a little bit more pliable. So I would put that on elbow pads or anything that's going to bend or curve to a certain shape. So whenever I'm going to place my pattern on my leather, I like to use double-sided tape, because with leather you can't put pins into it because you're going to leave permanent holes. So to alleviate that, that's why I use the double-sided tape. So I have my little pattern piece here, and on the back I've put my double-sided tape. The great thing about this is that it is repositionable. So what we're going to do is we're not going to tape onto the metallic side of the leather, because if we do and we pull it off, we're going to also pull off the process that's on the front of the leather. So we're going to turn it over to the suede side, and we're going to put our pattern piece where we want it. Now, this is the most important part. I can't stress it enough, to make sure that you check all your pattern pieces, that they all fit before you cut. Now, the tools for cutting, I like to use a rotary cutter and a ruler when I'm cutting handles, because it gives me really nice straight lines. And then for everything else, I just use my normal scissors, because the leather is not going to blunt it. Now that you have your pieces all cut out, we're ready to go to our sewing machine and get it all set up. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you're using a size 90 leather needle. These needles are different from all your other needles in the way that the point is shaped. It's more like a wedge or an arrowhead, so that it pierces through the leather and creates a really nice sturdy stitch. The other thing that you'll need to use is a really strong polyester. I don't use cotton for sewing leather because it's just not strong enough. So the next thing is the foot. So this is a non-stick glide foot, or also considered a Teflon foot. You can get this from any of your machine companies, no matter what sort of machine that you have. And the special thing about it is it has a Teflon coating on the bottom of the foot. So leather is like a kind of a plasticky surface. So if you just use your normal metal foot, it's going to kind of stick rather than gliding on top of the leather. Sometimes if you're using the wrong foot, you'll see really tiny stitches and it will perforate the leather. So to eliminate that, make sure you're using a Teflon foot. Now, if you don't have one, you can also use your walking foot or a dual feed foot. So what this is it has teeth on the bottom, your machine has teeth, and it's going to pull the leather evenly so that it stays together as you're sewing. The one thing you need to check is to make sure that when you sew on your leather, especially if you're using really beautiful soft sheepskin leather like what I have, that the teeth do not leave permanent marks or scratches in your leather. So always check it before you start sewing on your actual piece. Tip number 4 is setting the settings on your sewing machine. So whenever we're going to sew on the leather, we want to put our machine to a 3.0 stitch length. Anytime I'm working with heavy duty materials or I'm going through lots of thick layers, I like to take my stitch length up just that little bit so that the feed dogs aren't struggling and the machine's not struggling to go through all the thicknesses. So tip number 5 is sewing with your leather and keeping it nice. I like to use quilt binding clips whenever I'm sewing my leather together, because remember, we can't use pins because that's going to leave permanent marks. So if I have 2 pieces and I'm going to put them right sides together, I'm going to use my quilt binding clips and clip all the way down. You can use paper clips, but I have found that sometimes when you pull those out, it can leave scratches or marks on your leather. Once you're done with your final piece, I like to spray it with a little bit of waterproofing spray. I spray it over the whole thing, even if fabric's included, so the whole thing has a little bit of a coating of waterproofing, and that's just going to keep it nicer longer. And that's it. It really is that easy to sew with leather. So if after today's video you're so inspired and you're just so excited to get started working with leather, I have a few suggestions of projects to get you started. The first one is my Urban Outlook Tote. This is a great beginner's bag. It has the base that's leather and the handles that are leather, so it's a really good one to sink your teeth into, and it only takes half a hide of leather to make the whole thing, so it's not a huge investment. Another one is a great little free tutorial I have on my blog. It's just a really simple little clutch with fabric on the inside. Again, not a lot of leather, not a lot of investment, so if this is something that you're quite new to, start small, sink your teeth into it, find out how it all works before you start going on to your really big projects. Now, with all of that said, I bet you're sitting there wondering, where am I going to get all this leather from? So, lucky for you, I have leather and I sell leather, and it's all the Italian sheepskin leather that I've talked about today. So I want to make sure that you're successful and that you're getting the right leather for you to work with at home. So if you'd like to, send me an email, lindsay@sewtogrow.com.au, and I'm happy to hook you up with some really nice quality leather. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time.